Today, I'll be sharing my personal theory of change and the therapeutic model that guides my work with individuals, couples, and families, which is constructivist cognitive therapy. I wanted to start by briefly naming my core belief about change. At the foundation of my clinical work is the idea that people make sense of their lives through meaning. Psychological distress doesn't occur simply because of the events themselves, but because of how those events are interpreted, understood, and woven into a person's sense of self, relationships, and worldview. From this perspective, symptoms are not signs of pathology, but meaningful responses to lived experiences that once served an adaptive purpose. Because of this belief, my theory of change centers on helping clients examine, reflect on, and reconstruct meanings that have become rigid or no longer fit their current reality. Change happens when clients feel emotionally safe enough to explore these meanings and flexible enough to imagine new ones. This belief naturally aligns with constructivist cognitive therapy, which is the primary model I use when working with individuals, couples, and families. Constructivist cognitive therapy emphasizes collaboration, curiosity, and respect for the client's subjective experience, rather than positioning the therapist as an expert who corrects distorted thoughts. This model views therapy as a shared meaning-making process where clients are the experts on their own lives and reality is subjective versus objective. One of the reasons this model resonates so strongly with me is that it feels deeply respectful and human. It assumes that beliefs develop for a reason, often as a way to cope with relational, cultural, or systemic challenges. Instead of asking, how do we fix this thought, the question becomes, how did this belief come to exist? What purpose did this belief serve? And does it still serve you now? When working with individual clients, I used a constructivist lens to explore identity narratives, core beliefs, and emotional themes. I pay close attention to how clients talk about themselves, their experiences, because language often reveals the meanings that organize their emotional world. Therapy becomes a space for reflection rather than correction, where clients can loosen self-critical narratives and develop more compassionate ways of understanding themselves. With couples, constructivist cognitive therapy helps me conceptualize distress as arising from mismatched or unspoken meanings rather than individual deficits. Each partner brings their own beliefs about attachment, conflict, and intimacy that were shaped by family of origin experiences and cultural expectations. Conflict often occurs when these meanings collide. Rather than determining who is right or wrong, therapy focuses on helping partners understand how they interpret one another's behaviors and how those interpretations influence their emotional reactions. This process often reduces blame and increases empathy. When working with families, I view problems through the lens of shared and intergenerational meaning systems. Families carry narratives about roles, responsibility, emotional expression, and success that are passed down across generations. Some of these narratives can be helpful, while others become rigid over time. Constructivist family work invites families to examine these stories and collaboratively decide whether they still fit their current needs. An important strength of this model is its compatibility with diverse and multicultural work. The model does not assume there is a universal definition of health, functioning, or success. Those things can be subjective. Instead, it emphasizes cultural humility and curiosity. When working with clients whose values, beliefs, or experiences differ from my own, I approach therapy with the assumption that their worldview is meaningful and shaped by real experiences. Rather than imposing my own interpretations, I work collaboratively to understand how clients make sense of their identities, relationships, and struggles within their cultural and social context. This approach helps prevent pathologizing differences and allows clients to define what healing and growth look like for them. Across areas of difference such as race, socioeconomic status, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, education level, age, and disability status, I can use a constructivist stance to explore how societal narratives and lived experiences shape meaning making. For example, experiences of racism, marginalization, or economic instability are not treated as an individual problem, but as realities that influence beliefs about safety, worth, and belonging. Constructivist therapy also allows space to explicitly address power, privilege, and systemic factors, meaning does not exist in a vacuum. Clients' beliefs are shaped by social messages and structures, and therapy becomes a place where those influences can be named, examined, and reauthored in ways that support agency and resilience. I want to also briefly touch on the therapeutic relationship, which I see as a central mechanism of change. From a constructivist perspective, the relationship itself is not neutral. The therapist's stance of curiosity, humility, and collaboration creates the emotional safety needed for reflection and growth. I am especially mindful of power dynamics in the room and strive to maintain transparency and shared decision making. This relational approach supports autonomy and reinforces the beliefs that clients already possess the capacity for change. To ground this in a clinical example, I worked with a client who differed from me in terms of socioeconomic status, education level, and cultural background. This client presented with anxiety and chronic feelings of inadequacy. Rather than focusing solely on symptom reduction, we explored how beliefs about success and worth had developed within the context of early family expectations and ongoing systemic barriers. Through collaborative reflection, the client began to recognize that their self-critical beliefs once functioned as protective strategies in environments where mistakes felt unsafe. Understanding this reduced shame and allowed for greater self-compassion. Over time, the client experimented with alternative meanings rooted in resilience and personal value, which led to reduced anxiety and increased confidence in relationships. This case illustrates how meaning reconstruction can support lasting emotional change without invalidating lived experience. While I strongly value constructivist cognitive therapy, I can also recognize its limitations. Because this model emphasizes reflection and meaning making, it may not be the best fit for clients in acute crisis or those seeking highly structured directive treatment. It also requires a certain level of cognitive and emotional capacity for self-reflection. In these cases, I believe flexibility and ethical integration with other approaches are essential. This leads into how this model shapes my development as a clinician. Constructivist work challenges me to tolerate ambiguity, slow the process, and remain curious rather than solution focused. It requires ongoing self-reflection and accountability, especially when working across differences. Over time, this approach continues to shape how I understand not only my clients, but also myself as a therapist. In conclusion, constructivist cognitive therapy can provide a flexible, respectful, and culturally responsive framework for working with individuals, couples, and families. My personal theory of change aligns with its emphasis on meaning, collaboration, and relational safety. By honoring my clients' lived experiences and supporting reflective meaning making, I'm able to facilitate therapeutic change that is both educational, ethical, and enduring. Thank you.